This episode of Unqualified Opinions is brought to you by Hirechain. Your next hire could come from anywhere: a recruiter, a job board, a referral network, or conference. Hirechain manages hundreds of candidate sources for you, so you only see relevant applications and can focus on picking the best person for your team. On average, our customers fill open roles faster and 30% cheaper than with traditional recruiters. Leading companies like The Graph and Masari already use Hirechain. So get your time back. Talk to Hirechain today and hire the best, fast. Visit hirechain.io/Masari for prioritized onboarding. This podcast is meant for informational purposes only and is not meant to serve as investment advice. Hosts and guests may hold cryptocurrencies discussed in this episode. Opinions expressed may not reflect the opinions of Masari.
I promise you, the following is not intended to be a debate between Ethereum and Solana. Public blockchains require individually motivated parties, the miners and validators, to coordinate towards the common good. Token incentives help guide them so that what is good for the individual is good for the greater whole. The price of a native asset has a direct positive effect on how incentivized these parties are and, consequently, how secure the chain is. This is the idea of cryptoeconomic security, where the price of the native asset drives the security of a chain. Typically, a network meters its incentives and disincentives to guide these parties. However, the revolution in smart contracts have created opportunities for validators to generate revenue from outside the protocol. This has prompted a large-scale discussion on how to measure a chain's security, which in a small way is representative of the pros and cons of Ethereum and Solana. So, is a chain's economic security a key indicator of the network's overall security? If it is, how does it matter? And what does it mean for the future of how blockchains are designed? I'm Kunal Goel, and here's the story.
Masari's annual conference Mainnet returns this fall, September 30th through October 2nd. Now in its fourth year, Mainnet is the largest annual crypto event in New York, featuring leaders from crypto, Wall Street, and Washington. Join 3,000 attendees this year to hear from leaders like Cathie Wood, Hester Peirce, and Chris Dixon talk about what's in store for this year, 2025, and beyond. We'll cover the explosion of real-world assets on-chain, the industry's physical infrastructure, the codependent relationship of crypto and AI, the continued growth of smart contract platforms, acceleration of institutional products. We've got it all. Mainnet's your opportunity to meet hundreds of projects shaping the future of crypto and the institutional investors and capital allocators helping to fuel their development. You can enjoy a 20% discount using discount code MasariPod when registering at mainnet.events. Interested in a prominent presence at this year's Mainnet? Snag a meeting room or a booth and contact events at masari.io to explore all Mainnet has to offer. Hi, Kunal. Hi, Peter. How are you?
Hey, Ryan.
Hi, Ryan.
This is the first time we've had two guests on this podcast, and I think this is a good topic to do that for, because I think there's a genuine discussion to be had here. You guys recognize that there's been a lot of conversation recently about the idea of economic security. And while it's not explicitly a debate between Ethereum and Solana, those two projects have, their communities certainly anyway, have different views on the importance of economic security. And indeed, the two of you, have different ideas on the value of economic security of a chain. And so I'd like to get more into that with both of you. Maybe let's just start by hearing from each of you how you define the term economic security, because I think that will give some context into your answers and the positions that you're both taking. Kunal, maybe let's hear from you first.
Right. So blockchains are a decentralized infrastructure. We try to coordinate the activities of all personally motivated or individually motivated parties, and the crypto token, like the native token, Bitcoin, ETH, or whatever it may be, aligns the incentives of these distributed validators. So it effectively acts as a coordination mechanism in proof of work chains like Bitcoin. um, the reward per block uh, essentially drives how much mining power each proof of work blockchain receives. And in proof of stake networks, the sort of the total staked capital is like a function of that is the cost of attacking the network. So to me, economic security is the cost of acquiring enough sort of capital to attack the network by acquiring, like, let's say 33% or 51% or 67% stake, where you can control block production and extract value without, by censoring transactions, by including only a certain type of transactions. So that's economic security, the cost of acquiring enough stake to attack a network.
Yeah, I would agree with that definition. I think uh, when I think of economic security or see others mention it, it's usually just measured by like the staked market cap of the network. So this is just the value of all the tokens that are staked, and that can also be broken down into the different thresholds that Kunal mentioned of like 33%, 51%, or 2/3. But yeah, I would agree with that definition.
In the report that you two wrote, there's a few different key questions that you ask. But first or the maybe highest level is who is economic security useful for? Is it useful to apps or devs or users? And the second sort of larger question is it something that we can use to compare blockchains and security of those chains? So, Kunal, maybe let's start with you. I don't get the sense that either of you are taking a hard extremist line on this issue, but you tend to fall more on the side of economic security does matter. And at least the proof point that you wrote about in your article is less theoretical and more empirical evidence as to why it does matter.
Yes, exactly. So we haven't had any attacks on proof of stake networks. So back in the era of proof of work chains, we had these common reorgs, long range reorgs, with miners taking over 51% off, like, proof of work blockchains mining power for a long time. But we haven't seen that yet in proof of stake networks, and that's why it's considered not so much of a threat at the moment. But I think a reason for that is also that the reward for payoff has been lower than the cost of attack. So the essentially the ecosystem that's come up on top of these chains, it's already sort of relevant to how valuable the chain is. So they almost go hand in hand. And when a diverse ecosystem comes up on top of a chain, the price of the token naturally tends to increase. And this is what I mean by, like, the empirical evidence, where the more valuable a network is, like, it's very intuitive, but like the more valuable a network is, the more valuable the token becomes. uh, let's say that you have like $1 billion on a chain with $100 in stake market cap. Are you comfortable? And I say that I'm not, because anyone could theoretically acquire 67% of that $100. Like, that's not a significant cost to them, and make it so that I never redeem my $1 billion. It's like still a theoretical discussion, but it could happen, and that's why I think that there is, like, demand for security is important, at least to the users. To developers, Kyle Samani made this tweet that none of their portfolio companies has ever been concerned about how many whether their application has enough security, and that may be true. I don't have a response to that. I think developers will choose to deploy on chains that have good networks, and maybe that's why, again, this doesn't come up in practice so much. But I can see in a world where there are multiple options with different, like, this could be a differentiator for developers in the future, maybe, if not right now.
But if you can paint a picture of a world where in a future this becomes a larger issue or more of a differentiator for a chain, even though, to your point, we haven't seen it happen yet today.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the kind of world I'm imagining is where blockchain transactions, blockchain, like smart contracts, they replace the legal system in a way where what is true is what is on the blockchain. So if I have a tokenized real estate, like my house, tokenized real estate on the blockchain, and I would like to sell it, I need to make that transaction on blockchain X so that it's confirmed that I've sold it. And the legal forces, the anyone who's im- implementing that in real life, they will refer to the blockchain to receive confirmation that the asset has been sold to yeah the asset has been sold. So in that universe, I see that if blockchains don't have high enough economic security, like the $1 billion in the bank account is like a more it's an extreme example, but a house which is worth a few $1 million could be sold on a blockchain which maybe does not have enough security. So in that context, maybe you never are able to sell a house, and that's like sort of a more real example. Of course, right now we are in this like this perfect stage where blockchains are seeing real world adoption, but still aren't like the sovereign truth in in a global setting. So in this, it is where blockchains are only providing supporting evidence, not the key evidence, and where legal rights matter more than what are on-chain, what the on-chain truth may be. So in this era, of course, like the social structures, the regulatory system, that is the determinant of truth. But I imagine a future where blockchains are the determinant of truth, and in that case is where I think economic security will matter much more.
Peter, let's bring you in here because you tend to fall on the other side of this, that economic security tends to be overrated, at least in just current discussion, as an indicator of a network's overall security. Where would you maybe disagree with Kunal's vision?
Yeah, again, the argument here really comes from, or the argument that Anatoly really has here is that the cost to attack the network isn't necessarily like whatever threshold of the staked market cap that is. So it's not necessarily just having to buy up all those tokens. So I think with Kunal's example of he wouldn't feel comfortable holding $1 billion worth of a token on the network that has $100 in staked capital. I think the assumption is that if the staked market cap was above or higher than the amount of capital he was holding, maybe to some with some extra padding, or I don't know exactly what the number would be that he'd feel comfortable with. But that staked market cap number has to be higher than the capital he's holding on chain. And so I think the argument against that is, well, like the staked market cap could be higher, but the actual cost to attack the network could still be lower than the amount of capital he's holding on chain. So again, there's like other attack vectors besides just buying up that percentage of the staked market cap. So examples of this are like becoming a stake operator and just gaining a lot of stake. So that can be on Ethereum. They don't have delegated proof of stake. So we see this play out with LSTs, right? So Lido, at the time of writing the report, they had like 28% of staked ETH. It obviously did not cost them like 33 billion to obtain that. So most other networks are delegated proof of stake. So the majority of stake that validators have are delegated to them by stakers or delegators. So you can spin up a validator and attract as much stake as you want. And it maybe costs you some operating costs of running the validator, maybe some marketing costs of having to ship posts on Twitter to get a lot of stake. But ultimately, it didn't cost you kind of in dollar terms whatever percentage of stake you were ultimately able to obtain. So yeah, that's really the main argument against economic security, and it's really an argument against like equating economic security to the staked market cap. And so yeah, that's kind of on like the user side. Should users care? And I think it's more that they should not just care so one-dimensionally about the number, the figure that is like the staked market cap, but they should also care about kind of like the validator set, the kind of like the layer of like physical nodes, and that and the decentralization of that. So yeah, we see, and I think that's what like developers also care about. People building on chains. I don't think they care so much about kind of the staked market cap, right? And we see when Visa was explaining why they chose Solana to expand its stablecoin settlement pilot, they kind of had a section on like the security of the network, and they didn't mention anything about like the economic security or the staked market cap. They talked about the number of nodes. They talked about like the Nakamoto coefficient, the decentralization of these nodes in different geographical locations, like the different hosting providers these nodes were using, the number of validator clients that validators were running, kind of all of this more kind of like social layer, like physical node layer stuff, and not really anything about the economic security.
I'll respond to Peter quickly here. I think a few of the points that he made are all valid. So, one was that the network security is more than just its economic security. And I fully agree. I fully agree that the validator decentralization, the holder decentralization, the number of node softwares that the diversity in node softwares that it has, the geographical diversity, all of those matter. But in practice, these are hard questions to answer and not easy to compare between different blockchains and different blockchain architectures. Uh, Another problem here is that the once you take over 33% of a network or 51% of a network, the network allows you to do those actions. It allows you to censor transactions that you do not want, to make the incentives skew in your favor. So, since the network allows you, in my imagined future, it is not illegal. So, it won't be, it's hard to act against it in the future because the network, by definition, is like allows you to do this. And we have these assumptions that no one individual controls more than 33% or 51% or 67%. These are the assumptions in a proof of stake blockchain that don't have answers.
Maybe just to wrap us up here, what lessons should core teams or validators or investors take from this discussion? What is the overall impact to the progress of how layer ones are designed and built, and what sort of lessons should we take from this discussion?
Yeah, I don't think like there's too many takeaways here for the core kind of builder designer side on how like layer ones are constructed. I think the takeaway is a little bit more on like the user side or the application developer side of just what do we look at, what do we care when we're talking about the security of a network. And so my takeaway is that you should care less about the staked market cap, whatever that value is. You should care more about the number of nodes, the number of entities running those nodes, the Nakamoto coefficient, broken down by geographic locations, hosting providers, validator clients, stuff like that. As Kunal mentioned, all those metrics are tougher to find, tougher to reliably source than kind of the economic security, which is partially why I think like economic security is so relied upon and talked about when comparing the security of networks. But I think it's worth the time to try to dig into those numbers and try to understand what's going on. So I ultimately think it matters a lot more for the security of a network.
Yeah, for me, I'll break it down by stakeholders. So the developers of the layer one, like Anatoly that Peter references, or the Ethereum Foundation on the Ethereum side, I don't think they should care about the staked market cap at all, because that's essentially caring about the price, which, as we understand, is not the best metric to focus on for the builders themselves. They should be, as Peter said, they should be focused on decentralizing their validator set, decentralizing their holder set, creating more node softwares. Fully agree. But I think there are some builders that are optimizing for other factors. I've heard builders optimize for MEV because they believe that's the key value driver for a native blockchain asset. And I disagree with that. And that's what I bring in my report, that without focusing on the right metrics, they will waste their, limited resources chasing a goal that does not impact their layer one so much. For researchers, I gave a very, in my opinion, a strong model to compare against blockchains. I think this should be helpful in seeing how the value of a layer one asset is driven by the security demand, and that may be a consequence of its users, the real world assets on its chain, the largest application or layer two it may have. So I think it provides good framework for researchers to analyze and investors to use to invest. Finally, for app developers, I think there is this idea of like the fat protocol thesis, where all value is largely accrued by the infrastructure network. But uh, my take is a little different, where the more value that an application has, the more value the layer one has, and the more security the application has. The relationship is more symbiotic, it's more win-win. It's not that uh, one wins at the cost of the other. So both sides, the application developers and the layer one developers, should work together because they drive value to each other.
Kunal, Peter, thanks.
This episode was produced by Steve Bichimer based on the report Economic Security and Its Memes, written for Masari Pro by me and Peter Horton in May 2024. To read more about Ethereum, Solana, and why economic security matters, please consider subscribing to Masari Pro at masari.io.